Okay, let's start. Good morning, everyone. So this is the workshop that presents the PolyPhy software. This is basically a collaboration between University of California, Santa Cruz, and the OSPO, which is Open Source Program Office, formerly known as CROSS, rather it has morphed from CROSS, which was and still is the Center for Research in Open Source Software. There's a significant number of contributors or collaborators in New Mexico State, as well as other places. So, yeah, I mean, Jordan has just asked the question, who are the contributors? So the main stakeholders, beside myself, are Joe Burchett, who is the current professor at New Mexico State University, Angus Forbes, who used to be at UCSC, my former mentor here, and now is at Purdue, and also Carlos Malsam, who is the director of CROSS and OSPO, which I already mentioned. There's a number of people involved in this project that I don't have time to go through all of them. Shout out to Stephanie, who is always there to assist us with a million different things that we, really don't like to do, to be honest. Jan Ivaneski, who actually wrote the very first prototype, he's an independent contributor. I also want to mention the summer contributors from the Google Summer of Code, Asfari, Patrice, and Harry. They are not on the call, mostly because they are in completely different time zones. India and both are from India. Patrice is from the East Coast. A little bit about myself. So I have a background in computer graphics and visual computing. I done my PhD in Germany, Max Planck Institute for Computer Science, working on GPU simulations of optical phenomena, like participating media mainly. So anything from sparse media like atmospheres to smoke and clouds, and even dense tissues. Then I worked in Prague at Charles University. We worked on appearance prediction for 3D printing, so working with full color prints. And this was before I came to UC Santa Cruz, which is about 3 years ago. This whole project really is motivated by this vision of fractals that has been started by Benoit Mandelbrot. He definitely built on the work of people before, but he kind of coined the term and developed a lot of the theory. Basically, Mandelbrot was using mathematics to describe shapes in nature. He showed a way how to describe complexity on many levels using simple rules. Hence the quote. So this project is really an effort to make these shapes or these geometries, these fractals, practical and useful in data science. The philosophy of the project is actually sort of a loop where science is inspired by art, and in fact this project has been largely inspired by art, but also on the other hand science informs art in this feedback loop. And I'll show examples of projects that are kind of a testament to that. So the workshop itself has several parts. I'll give about a 20 minutes or so intro, and then there is about an hour of demos. I'll be showing the 2D and 3D pipelines that we have developed over the summer, and there's going to be a wrap-up and questions. If you have questions anytime, please ask people in the room or people online in the chat. I'll try to monitor everything as we go. The workshop or the background itself, some of you might already know, especially the astronomers among you. So if you already do, you can read your emails in the first 20 minutes, and I'll give you a heads up when we actually get to the practical part of the demonstration. So what is the motivation for this project? So in 2019, we started talking with Joe Burchett about the possibility of reconstructing the cosmic web out of galaxies. For those who, or galaxy positions, and for those who don't know what the cosmic web is, it's this massive network of gas and presumably dark matter that connects galaxies or spans galaxies. And it's really massive. Just to give you the idea, if you zoom in into this structure, you start seeing individual galaxies as these bright points. So from what the science knows nowadays, we and everything in the universe that glows exists kind of inside of this network of gas and dark matter, and is fueled by it as well. So the matter to fuel star formation actually comes at least in part from this network. How this network formed, or how the cosmic web has formed, well, it was basically condensation of matter due to gravity and anti-gravity. We started, with the Big Bang 14 billion years ago. It's a long time. And in this time, we have actually condensed this network. So it is not grown. This structure has actually condensed by the matter in the universe clustering together into denser and denser structures, and eventually galaxies. As you see here, the vertical axis is time, and yeah, you see that we actually form thicker filaments and also larger, longer filaments out of this initial uniform distribution matter. We see the evidence of the cosmic web indirectly through simulations. This is a snapshot of a simulation that shows temperature and metallicity of gas simulated within the PNG project. We visualize this using an interactive framework that we're collaborating on with New Mexico State. But when you look at the sky, you don't really see the cosmic web at all. And the reason is that it doesn't really emit any light or any appreciable light. It also doesn't really scatter all that much. So really the only evidence we have for it is spectroscopy, which is when you observe a distant source of light, you actually see the light being absorbed in different distances from us in what seems to be empty space, but really is the filaments of the cosmic web. So our mission in this project has been actually to find the cosmic web using galaxy positions only, which is really the data that we have. And we know that the galaxies kind of anchor the cosmic web, that they are kind of the nodes of the network, if you will. Any questions so far? We have some other evidence that the cosmic web exists. For instance, this is the cosmic microwave background radiation. You see these kind of fluctuations across this image. And those are really the imprints of the filaments, or at least some of those are. So turning a page, the sort of the motivation or the inspiration really for this work came from a completely different world, from the world of interactive art. Here you see work by Say Jensen, who in 2018 actually built on previous work that simulated slime mold in real time on a single GPU. And with this algorithm, he actually created these beautiful networked structures that he exhibited in different forms, even as interactive installations. And so we were inspired by the ability of this virtual organism to grow networks and structures, and thought about doing this in actual data. The slime mold itself, if you don't know it, it's a protist. It's a very ancient organism. It's not a fungus. It's not a plant. It's not an animal. It's its own branch of nature, kingdom, I guess. is actually a single cell that grows to form this network in the search for food. The way how it does it is navigating sort of the chemical landscape in the environment where it grows. So I call it just following chemical gradients, which are emitted by food, but also by the organism itself. And people have been fascinated by this for about a century, biologists at least. In computer science, in about 2000, people have taken note that this is an interesting model organism. And in 2010, there was this famous study where Japanese scientists have shown that you can actually grow networks very similar to actual transportation networks. So this was the Tokyo railway system. They gave the actual living slime mold positions of dense urban areas within the Tokyo sort of region, and they actually fed it old flakes by just positioning them where these dense populations reside. And the result was very similar to the actual railway system in Tokyo. So this was kind of the first proof that the organism can solve computationally interesting problems. When it comes to the cosmic web, there is evidence that there are connections. Obviously, the cosmic web grew very differently by condensation rather than from a single point or seed as the slime mold does. But the overall structures just seem so close to each other that we thought this is worth a shot. So to explain what the algorithm does, imagine millions of little particles called agents flowing around in space, in 3D space or 2D space. And these agents do three things. They sense the environment in front of themselves. So they basically cast kind of virtual probes and measure the density of a virtual marker around them. They choose in which direction they should move based on sort of the values of this marker around them, and then they just move. They sort of create the path in space. And by repeating these three steps, you get something we call random walks. So this is a terminology from Monte Carlo simulation. Random walk is just a chain of positions connected by edges, which we don't really represent. We just care about the positions. And what you see here is that the agent, the green particle, tries to follow the structure of the red particles or orange particles, which are data. And this data emits a marker, the gray sort of the gray field in the background. And so the agent is trying to actually follow the structure of this marker field. But this is a single agent. What happens when you have many of them, you can start superimposing their paths or trajectories in 3D space. So what you see here is 50 agents on the left. They just kind of seem to draw random squiggly lines. But when you scale it to 1 million, you start seeing patterns in the data. And this is the same information, just more of it. So these agents, they draw discrete paths. But when you overlap many of them, you actually get something we call density field. So basically a scalar field of densities that represent where the agents can be found. And this scalar field is the estimate of the cosmic web that we actually work with. The main contribution of this work was that we actually added a completely probabilistic sampling for the agents. Before that, everything worked deterministically and didn't really scale to multiple dimensions. So by actually reformulating the whole algorithm in terms of probabilities, we not only got a more robust method that scales to multiple dimensions, but also made it possible to kind of customize it to measure or to reproduce different sharpness of these features, which is actually important when you're trying to model the cosmic web. The algorithm itself we published in this paper in Artificial Life, published by MIT. It's an open access paper, so you can check it out. It's been finished quite recently, and we will present it next year. But I also want to mention several results from astrophysics, which we started working on in 2019 and first published in 2020. So let's skip this. So kind of the first major result was reconstructing the cosmic web out of purely galaxy positions. The first study that we've done was on 37,000 galaxies from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. Basically, this is a 2D projection of those galaxies in celestial coordinates, sort of azimuth and polar angle. And you already see the structure in this data, but it's not very obvious, where the actual three-dimensional filaments of the cosmic web would be, how to reconstruct that. So using the MCPM algorithm, we actually got the first density map of the cosmic web on top of this data. We were able to verify it against actually spectroscopic measurements that you can see here. So these are kind of linear probes into the three-dimensional structure where you can see the absorption due to the cosmic web. But what this gave us is actually a complete picture of the densities.
Just to clarify, what are the G and G plus F?
So G is galaxies, so footprints of galaxies, so to say. That's the Markov field, and G plus F is the galaxies plus the field reconstructed by the sun. So we call this field the trace, as in it's a trace of the agents in 3D space. These are just superimposed. So actually speed up a little. Another interesting question that we were able to ask thanks to this work was, what is the density of the cosmic web between us and a distant galaxy? The galaxy in question here emitted what astronomers call the fast radio burst. So it's an event where a large amount of energy is emitted by some kind of celestial object. I'm not sure we even know what these objects are or how these events actually happen, but we observe them, and what we actually can see is a dispersion of these signals in time. And so this particular fast radio burst, marked 1906-08, which is the date when it was observed, we actually saw that, or the astronomers saw that it has an unnaturally high dispersion, so presumably passed through a field of gas that actually scattered or dispersed it in time and space. And so we were actually able to pinpoint this the particular region in space where we just have this increased density of the cosmic web. So this part here. The last work that we done with Joe and his team was actually building a catalog of the cosmic web. So we took 9 snapshots. Well, actually, we took 2 snapshots of the galaxy positions, split them into 9 different slices, and reconstructed the cosmic web for each of them individually. So you see the map in here. The more detailed part here in the center is the SDSS, the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. This is about 300,000 galaxies, and then going way out up to redshifts of about 0.5, I think. We actually included several, I think tens of thousands more distant galaxies from a separate survey called LRG. And this is the map. Currently, we are working on validating this data. So, for instance, part of this work, we were able to show that the algorithm can actually characterize the density of the filaments. We can think of it as a frequency, and that this grows linearly in space, which actually corresponds to the density of the data that we are able to measure. Anyway, I think I should skip all this. If we have time to get back to it, I can get back to it later. So kind of to sum up what we've done here, the MCPM is kind of a first data-driven simulation of Physarum networks, or one that actually uses Physarum networks for working with data and reconstructing these kind of structures. This was enabled by this probabilistic sampling and complete reformulation of the algorithm, which is actually very fast because it's an agent-based method. You can parallelize it very easily. So on a single GPU, this thing converges in about 1 minute or less. It's also an interactive process. So as the reconstruction is happening, you can supervise it. You can visualize the data as they are being reconstructed, and we will see that in a second. And finally, because this is really just a simple agent-based algorithm, it's really easy to interpret it and explain what's actually happening, both to experts to visualizations and non-experts to how tree works. That I have to speak. So,
Are you taking questions now or wait to the end?
yeah, sure. No.
So the physical mechanism for the web is that you have diffuse dark matter and it coalesces over time into the galaxies.
Right.
That is, the web itself kind of sharpens up and disappears in some regions. But my understanding is that the slime mold inspired algorithm actually grows outward from the observed galaxies. That is, the arrow of time runs in the opposite direction, right? The slime mold becomes the filaments moving between galaxies, right?
Kind of. I mean, it depends how you actually initialize the agents of the simulation. So usually we initialize them uniformly and allow them to condense into the structures that you're seeing here.
Oh,
in fact, this video is a good demonstration of that. So we start with just galaxies. This particle data set is simulation, not galaxies, but clusters of matter, kind of like a proxy for galaxies, but doesn't matter so much. So anyway, the red blobs are the galaxies, the significant chunks of matter, and the blue are the agents. They're kind of almost uniformly initialized in space. Of course, most of them somewhere near galaxies, so almost instantly they start converging on galaxies. The galaxies themselves emit this marker, so that attracts the agents. But yeah, we're not growing these networks as you would grow a slime mold. It's also a heuristic, this algorithm. So we're not really trying to reproduce physics, right? We just look for similarity of patterns. These things. And you see the growth here. So you start with something that's more or less uniform, and it kind of condenses or converges to these structures.
Okay, that was going to be my question, which is whether the resulting structures are the same, whether it's running time forward to form the galaxies or growing the network from the observed galaxies. So
yeah,
I don't know if that was studied in the paper, or if there's even a way to study that.
Yeah, it really depends on you. I mean, the whole modeling is, yeah, we're not trying to reproduce the process.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
So anyway, what you're seeing right now is a video. Thanks for the question, by the way. What you're seeing here is a process of fitting, which we already went through, and then different visualization modes. This is the old prototype called PolyPhy. which actually within this project, within PolyPhy, we're trying to port to Python. Polyform is useful insofar as it enabled us to do all these studies. Some of them I had time to mention. But it's a C++ software, so it really takes a lot of effort to compile, as Drew over there has experienced. It's also Windows only because it originated in sort of the graphics context. So it was written in DirectX and compute shaders. Not really very practical. So we actually set out to port it to Python, and that's what I'll be demonstrating today. So what I'm showing you here is kind of an overview of different modalities of both, of visualizing the data that they actually get in the reconstruction. And this is what we're working on reproducing in Python. So PolyPhy, as I said, is a port of Polyform. It's basically entirely written in Python. We're using Taichi as the API to actually talk to the GPU and make it do massively parallel work for us. In the demo today, I want to show you several different use cases. Two of them are two-dimensional, and two of them are three-dimensional. And I'll just be going through this as we go. So first of them is a use case of just feeding to discrete two-dimensional data. And I'll start with just building an intuition of how this works. On simple sort of synthetic data generated from a 2D Gaussian distribution. So here, yeah, what I forgot to mention is actually that you can follow this just by owning the repository. I will paste it in chat. So if you clone this, the only special dependency that we're using is the Taichi package, which can just be installed through pip as under the name Taichi. But you really don't need to do it. It's just if you want to follow the code in your machine, I'll be showing. So the outline of the actual simulation is rather simple. We have initialization where you load the 1D array of data. Again, this will be Gaussian data to start with, and then I'll show an actual slice of the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. We also create a 1D array of agents, which represent the actual simulated organism. And then we have something called the trace grid, which stores the result of the reconstruction, so that starts empty. We also have the deposit grid, which stores the marker field. So whatever the data are emitting is literally deposited in this field. It's tool because we actually need to do a ping pong blurring of this filtering. So
Oscar, can you say something about the dimensionality here? I mean, this XYW data array is really, it's linearized into a 1D.
Yeah, so the data
I keep the trace grids 2D instead of linearizing them.
Right. So the data is just a 1D sort of chain of points, and every point has an X and Y coordinate in space and a weight. So the data are actually weighted linearly. The agents have the same. They also have an angle of propagation, so the direction in which they move. In 3D, it is going to be richer, obviously, but in 2D, we need only one angle to store that. And the trace and the deposit grids, they're actually representing the dense information of where the agents happen to be in 2D space. So that's where they actually kind of store the footprints. So yeah, the 1D array of data just means that it's represented as a 1D array, even though the data are two-dimensional in terms of their coordinates.
And that's the setup for the GPU linearization.
Yeah, exactly. So Yeah, so the dimensionality here refers to the storage, not the nature of the. And the simulation itself is pretty straightforward. So after some bookkeeping, you first process the data by actually emitting the deposit, the marker field from them in space. And you make a step with the agents. So that's like a propagation step. Then there are two relaxation steps. One is for the deposit. So you sort of blur or diffuse the deposit in space. And the relaxation step for the trace is just kind of exponential averaging of time. You will see that in a second. And then you visualize it. So the entire code is basically one large Jupyter notebook. So this is pretty compact. The entire intelligence of the software really sits in this cell somewhere in the middle. These are the GPU kernels that do all the heavy lifting. The only one of them is actually any complex is the agent step, so the propagation step, which actually moves the agents by a single step in space and time. Most of this code is just different strategies for sampling. Maybe easy to show you all. All right. All right, so can you guys see this? Yeah. Okay, so what you see here is a visualization of the deposit and trace on top of each other. The deposit is this green field. So what you see is a cluster of points sort of in the middle of this. This is the data. So here we have just synthetic data generated by randomly sampling a 2D Gaussian in the center of this. And all the structure around is basically what the agents generated themselves. So these kind of cellular looking structures. So that's the deposit, that's the marker field that actually communicates what is in space and where. And then we have the trace field, which is the orange, red, purple stuff. And this represents the agents as they travel through space. So in this simulation, we have 1 million agents, and they're continuously flowing through space and drawing their paths. If I kind of shorten the averaging window, you can maybe start seeing the individual agents.
I don't know if you can see that in the video.
Yeah, maybe like this.
Something's happening. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of wobbly. But yeah, so these are the two main modalities that the simulation works with. And really what the agents are trying to do is they try to navigate this data. So the points that you see in the middle. But if there's no data around, they just start synthesizing their own structures. So when I actually turn down the deposit, you see that there is this irregular structure in the middle, which represents kind of the patterns randomly found in the data. These are just random Gaussian samples, so there's really nothing interesting about it. It's just to demonstrate what's going on. And wherever there is no data, you just see this kind of regular pattern of cells that the algorithm generates itself. What I can do here is several things which will become relevant later. So one major or most important thing in the whole simulation is actually modifying the scale in which the agents sort of detect everything around them, the sensing distance. When I increase this, you see that the whole field kind of reorganizes itself and really just creates cells or creates structures with different sizes. So if I originally we had 0.5, so so you had structures which are about this big. If I push this to, let's say, 2.5, you get structures which are about 5 times that size. It takes a few seconds for the simulation to kind of settle in some kind of equilibrium here. I can vary the agent speed, so basically trade precision for speed of convergence. So if I increase the step size of the agents, you get fuzzier result, but quicker. If I decrease that, you increase the precision, but it takes longer to converge to equilibrium. So far, so good. So another thing that we can do is change the angle, sort of the portion of space in front of the agents that they actually are sensing. Maybe it's good to show this image. So what I was showing you so far is changing this distance in which the agent does the sensing. Here we can also change the angle, so the opening angle, which defines the sort of disparity between the probe in front of the agents and the probe which is offset by this angle. And that basically means that the higher the angle is, the sort of more space the agent sees and the faster it can turn as well. So now we have a pretty high value of the angle. If I decrease it, what you see is that the agents are starting to generate kind of straighter paths, and eventually they'll just, if the angle is too small, they'll lose the ability to actually turn and navigate through the data efficiently. So you get this kind of pseudo structure that really doesn't work. So usually the angle is happiest somewhere in the middle. This is the opening angle in radians. So this basically means the agent can see a full half circle in front of it. Okay, we have also something called the sampling exponent. So this defines how sharp the structures get. If I decrease that, the agents navigate or choose directions proportionally to the linear densities in the environment. If I increase this, they actually start being more picky and prefer higher densities more frequently. So this is the probabilistic sampling I was talking about before. So you see that if this is 1, the agents just generate very fuzzy structures because they just kind of linearly follow whatever the density around them is. But if I put this to high values, you see that the pathways condense and they become much sharper. If I disable the data, you can see it very easily. Yeah, it's kind of the process of condensing the reconstruction as we talked about. What I can also do, I just did it without warning, you can vary the amount of deposit, so the marker that both agents and data emit. So what I've just done is completely disable the marker that the agents are emitting. What you see is all regions in space which actually don't contain any data, they just don't create any patterns, any structure. So this is the mode where you want to actually completely disable sort of the intelligence of the agent themselves and just let the data guide the agents through and generate structure purely from that. So you see that here we get a lot of structure sort of in the center where the data are, but the moment the data gets sparse, so you lose the structure up to the point where there is nothing. In the 2D mode, we can actually place new data points. So I can start actually interactively placing points, and you see that as soon as I do that, we have just structure appearing and connecting these new data points. This has no other purpose than just representation. Obviously, you want your data to be given. But yeah, we can make funky trees like this. And you see that the agents have always kind of the tendency to connect things together. So the moment I generate the data point in the center, the agents are starting to go through it. And the more points I put there, the more this structure gets reinforced. So far so good? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, one thing I didn't see so far, maybe it's down below in the parameters, was the number of agents or the spatial density of the agents at the very beginning. Is that fixed or is that settable?
That's fixed for the simulation.
And why is that fixed, or is there any advantage to changing it?
Not really so much. I mean, usually you want to choose that according to the resolution of the construction that you want. So if you have a large sort of field that you want to reconstruct, you need more agents. But really, the way how the algorithm is formulated, the agent just kind of always flows through space, always tries to search for more data in front of it. So even if you had a single agent, eventually you would get a complete reconstruction. The catch is, of course, numerical precision. So you would have to be sitting here for probably a year, you know, and you would just run out of floating point precision. So that's the advantage of using more agents. You just get more or faster reconstruction just by the virtue of higher precision that it gives you. The other benefit is when you actually use the agents or you enable them to emit the marker themselves, because then the structures that you get are actually dependent on the number of agents. So if I disable data here, and you just see the agents, so these structures will change if you have more or less agents, right? The auto-synthesized structures. And yeah, that can be understood as kind of just the size of or the mass of the organism that you're simulating. The reason it's fixed is just because it's GPU, so you want to pre-allocate all your data and never touch it if you don't have to. Yeah, really, I never found the benefit of changing that in real time as you run the simulation. So yeah, the cool thing is that the agents can really generate all kinds of structures at different scales. The parametric space is pretty small. I mean, it has half a dozen dimensions or so. Some of these parameters are just the visualization settings. So still exploring the parametric space is something that is fun. It's just fun to play with this. I often do. So any questions about the synthetix case before we move on to data? Anything in chat? Okay, so I'll use the same code, just load it with actual data. So the data I'm going to show you is a two-dimensional slice of the Sloan Digital Sky Survey dataset, the very first one that we actually worked with. And scale it a little. So to those who have seen the Sloan Digital Sky Survey data, this should look familiar. So this is kind of a single slice or like a projection of the 3D data into 2 dimensions. And this is 10,000 galaxies. yeah, 10,000. So I just kind of randomly subsampled the 37,000 galaxies of the ocean data set. Otherwise, this is the exact same thing we've been looking at. So you see that we have structure in the middle that corresponds to the sort of two-dimensional flattened version of the cosmic web, and then you have the auto-synthesized structure that's everywhere around it. If I disable the agent marker, you see that all this auto-generated structure disappears, and you can only work with the data. So yeah, this is kind of a 2D version of the cosmic web that we had before. There are several options that I wanted to show you that actually there are several options that actually describe the sampling strategies. So what I can do is I can show you the very first sort of original algorithm that we were starting from. We call it the Jones style sampling. What this does is you have agents which make constant steps. They only sample a discrete number of directions, so they don't sample the full sort of angle or cone of directions in front of themselves. They just sample sort of like a three-pronged fork in front. And the selection of the direction is deterministic insofar as whatever is higher, like whatever concentration of the marker is higher in front of them, they just go there. They don't care about the proportion. They just always want to maximize the sort of the yield of the marker. And so this is what has been assumed is the behavior of the slime mold. So the slime mold itself is very greedy. You could say it's selfish. It always tries to just maximize the sort of the amount of space that it can cover, given the distribution of its body. And so this is what it's supposed to do. It's not a very good reconstruction, as you can see. We are missing a lot of the data. I can sort of play with the parameters to cover more, but in our experiments we have found that this is actually not a very good strategy. It often misses smaller data points, or it just tends to overemphasize big clusters. You see that this is a very sort of uneven distribution. And so the steps that you can do to mitigate this is change the sort of stepping behavior of the agents from making constant steps to actually making steps that are generated from a 1D probability distribution. We're using the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution, which is similar to an exponential, or they have slightly different shape, and there are some theoretical reasons that we chose this one. You can make the agents do continuous sampling of the cone of directions. And so already these two steps actually increase the diversity and sort of the coverage of the network that you get. And then making the agents less greedy by actually selecting their directions probabilistically, you sort of smoother this even more, and also get the ability to change the sharpness of these features. So again, this is changing the sampling exponent, we call this. Again, sharpen the structures or make them fuzzy. Well, it's nice to be able to do when you want to tune the reconstruction to the actual, let's say, age of the universe. Any questions about this? So far, again, these are just 2D cases to kind of get the intuition about what's going on here. We'll soon get to the 3D case, and it will become clear what all this is for. Before we do that, I wanted to show you one camera. You wanted to ask something?
Yeah, I had a quick question. This is all amazing and awesome, but I was curious, when you've compared the agents and how they traverse the density field for galaxies and, for instance, the Sloan that you were talking about, obviously there's a lot of toggles and variables that you can change to change the sharpness of the various different features. But when you compare that with actual, like the Bolshoi simulation or the actual density field that comes out of the simulations in terms of how sharp it is or how smooth it is or how connected it is, do you have kind of a preferred set of these values that seems to best match the simulated cosmic web density field that we see in simulations? So because I'm thinking of the application for explicitly the cosmic web, and obviously there's all these different ways I can change it, but I wanted to see if you guys had already kind of calibrated it to what the best set of features were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, you said it right. This is just like playing with parameters. Really, in the past 3 years, we've done several calibrations of this. Most thoroughly in the last study, the catalog that I've been showing. And yeah, in the calibration, we actually took both the Bolshoi-Planck data, and I think we also used Illustrix PNG, but mainly Bolshoi-Planck. And what we've done was just, pretty simple, fitting to the simulation, and first of all, visually inspecting was actually what does the reconstruction look like. So as you said, very correctly, whether it's continuous or interconnected, so you don't have gaps, but also just kind of the overall match. So for instance, if you generate a density field that's at least roughly proportional to the masses of the pillows or the galaxies that you're working with. And then in the second step, once we were happy with the scales of the reconstruction and everything, so we saw that visually that the structure matches, we generated several different snapshots using these different kind of sharpness values, the sampling exponent I've just been showing. And then we actually ran or reconstructed the mapping from the reconstructed density to an actual cosmic overdensity, which we had the reference values from, and just try to get the best match possible.
Try to get it matched up. I see.
Yeah, and just went with the one that was the best, basically that yielded the most linear relationship between the reconstruction and the reference.
So then are those values for these various different variables that one can toggle and play with in your software, are those values included in the paper or in some place that I can kind of like use those as my set things when trying to reproduce the cosmic web from Sloan or from a galaxy simulation or something?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, in the paper that describes this catalog here, so there is kind of a summary paper that includes these results. So that's the publication of the whole SDSS, the 17 data release. And then, I think in August, we actually, with Joe and Matt, we submitted the dedicated, like, full description. I don't know in which stage the paper is, but you can definitely have it.
Okay, cool, awesome.
Or Matt or Joe an email. And yeah, so the plot that I'm showing right here is actually the sensing distance value that we kind of inferred from this data. And so what we see here is that with increasing redshift, so the x-axis, so the distance from us, you actually have to upscale the sensing distance for the agents to match the density of the data that we get from the observations.
I see.
What we see here is also that the SDSS, the core SDS data set, is much denser than the LRG data set. But
I see. So you still need to play with it according to the details of your particular sampling of the density field, whether that's large red galaxies or whether it's just like a larger galactic population, or if you're probing things with fast radio bursts or something like that, there's going to be some play in the variables that you use to try and reproduce that underlying scalar field.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is why I'm such a proponent of using the interactive visualization, coupled with the reconstruction, because you see what's actually happening. That said, in the future, I'm definitely planning to actually develop an unsupervised fitting for PolyPhy, that was the plan for Polyform, but at this point, it doesn't really make sense to pour any effort into that. So yeah, we want to have, basically, we want to make this into an actual AI that can infer the density of data and adapt to it by itself.
Cool.
You know.
No, that's all super awesome. Sorry to interrupt. I was just curious if
No. That's a great question. Thank you.
If you had those. Okay, it looks like Joe has a question too.
Joe.
Yeah, so about these parameters and how sensitive the resulting fit is from, the various knobs that you can turn. I mean, isn't it a true statement that the emergent structure for our Cosmic Web application is actually pretty robust to to those parameters and within sort of reasonable ranges, right? Like if you get a reasonable looking fit that looks like filaments, basically, right? Like the fine details, it's actually pretty stable. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. I mean, for instance, in this example, we have the SDSS data, which we actually in the catalog released as a single snapshot. So one, overall reconstruction over the 300,000 galaxies within like it's the redshift 0.1, I think, or 0 to 0.1. And I also, for just the sake of testing, I sliced this data set into several snapshots and then fitted each separately. So these gray columns here, you actually see that the optimal values for the sensing distance, so essentially the scale, change. They grow with increasing distance. But for the entire slice that we released, we just used a single value, and I think it was around 4.5 or something. So it's pretty robust. Within the reasonable range, you get very similar looking estimates. And the eventual fitting or autonomous operation will have to figure this out on its own. And I think the criterion is just the connectivity. So Cameron, you actually had a good yesterday. Jason?
Do the agents interact with each other?
In the reconstruction from data, not really. We don't want them to hallucinate like structures that don't exist there.
Well, one question. So I kind of noticed, as expected, that the PolyPhy filaments are smoother than the filaments that you would see from Bolshoi, for example. And so I wondered if there was a way to kind of capture that lumpiness, or you'd call it gradient density, along a filament. And the only way I could think of to do that would be to let the agents actually interact with each other as they are trying to create the filament between galaxies. So I don't know if you or Joe or Cameron have anything to say about that.
What do you mean by clumpiness? You mean like a roughness along the edges, or?
I mean, I think Joe and Cameron are probably the real experts here, but my impression was that if I look at Bolshoi, for example, I can see that along a filament, you see some small matter density fluctuations. They don't rise to the level of being a galaxy, but they're there nonetheless. And I think that might not be captured with the agent. So the first question is that important to capture? Maybe that's the question for Joe. And then the second question would be, how might you adapt the algorithm to capture that?
Right. So, guys, did you hear him? Did you hear the question?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, Cameron. Cameron is actually the simulator.
So yeah, there are fluctuations in the cosmic web where you see an enhancement in the density, but it doesn't always necessitate that there will be a galaxy along that filament, because it's a power spectrum, right, of the distribution of density over space. And at the largest enhancements, you'll have clusters of galaxies and groups of galaxies, but at the smaller ones, kind of in between some of those larger filaments and larger density structures, we believe, and this is part of the whole cosmic web idea, we believe there's an enhancement, but it may not rise to the level of having a full nonlinear gravitational collapse of structure and galaxies there. So I guess the thing that I'd say is, and Oscar was describing this, you can play with these various parameters that are present in Polyform to to enhance or blur out the various different features that are present depending on the data set that you're trying to fit. Now, when you're using the Sloan data set or you're using the LRG, the large red galaxy data set, those are preferentially the largest galaxies, the most collapsed structures. Whereas if you're probing things that are closer by, that you have more sensitivity to smaller scale structures, or if you're using something that isn't even in the visible light, it's in fast radio bursts or something like that, that's potentially probing less overdense structures, then you might need to play with that feature. But I think ultimately that this code has enough flexibility to allow you to fit various different things to the underlying density structure, depending on if you're only probing the highest density features like LRGs, or if you're probing slightly less. So I don't know. I think this is a general enough thing, and it's going to take some iterations to figure out what's the appropriate variable values to fit the underlying data set, depending on what your field is that you're playing with.
And I'll just add to that, as an observational astronomer, my applications really focus on either the local environments of galaxies. That's, in terms of how the galaxies react to in their evolution, react to their large scale environment, or how the large scale environment reacts to the presence of galaxies. So, for my particular science, I'm not so interested in these, dark matter over densities that don't actually form galaxies. So, just
but definitely, like intergalactic medium filaments are an interest to certain members of the population. Like X Prochaska is very concerned with IGM filaments and that sort of thing, and their implications for the overall evolution of cosmological structure. And it's hard to probe these things because we don't have any other methods, but I think the tools are here to be able to do that with upcoming observations that are coming out.
And I'll say the first paper, that we wrote on this was all about the IGM and, all about the changing physical conditions of the IGM as a function of cosmic web density. And, I'll point to that result to say that the reconstructed density field tracked very well until the very highest densities, the absorption signal that we saw from neutral hydrogen. So for our purposes there, we seem to be capturing the most salient features of the large scale structure.
All right, thank you guys. So speaking of 3D, let's actually jump right in. I have another 2D case I wanted to show you, but let's go first into the 3D and then we can back from 3D as well. I would like to for sure. So anyway, the 3D version is very similar. It uses exactly the same workflow or pipeline. The difference is that the data we're working with have just one additional dimension. So the data set itself is X, Y, Z, and the weight or mass. And the area of agents is X, Y, Z, the polar angle, the azimuth angle, and the weight. So we need one additional coordinate for the agents and one additional coordinate for the direction because we are in 3D space, obviously. So we're using spherical coordinates to represent that. Other than that, everything is identical. The trace and deposit grids are 3D instead of 2D, but it's just a cosmetic change. Obviously, the change is much bigger when we consider memory consumption. So the 2D case, I don't know if some of you took note, but run several hundred frames per second. So like, I don't know, a few milliseconds per frame. And this one is much chunkier. It also takes forever to load. And definitely the resolutions we have now are smaller than the PolyPhy one because we're in Python and Taichi is still in development. Nevertheless, I present you with the the first 3D version of Polyform that your eyes have seen. The visualization is done through ray marching. So this is a Sloan Digital Sky Survey data, the large data set that we had in the last catalog. So this is 300,000, 325,000 galaxies or so. The resolution of this is, of the grids are these. So quite like half the size or something like that, 1/3 of the size that we have in Polyform. And this is subject to improvement in the future. Nevertheless, we get the structures pretty reliable too. So let me actually set it up right. So first of all, most importantly, we need to find the scale. So let's say that's 5. These units are, by the way, they can be arbitrary. In this case, they represent megaparsecs. So that's the cosmological units that. And yeah, I'm just kind of quickly configuring this to save us some time. The fitting here takes a bit longer, obviously, first of all, because this is now running at 30 frames per second, so about 30 milliseconds per frame. Second, because we are now trying to fill 3D space with reasonable data or meaningful data instead of 2D space, so everything is basically taking longer. Nevertheless, as I'm talking here, we already are getting the results. And here's the structure. Smooth and illegal by increasing the filtering or the averaging window. If you see a bit of noise, that's due to the visualization. Can you actually see? No.
Okay.
Thank you, video compression. For once, you're useful.
Thank you.
So yeah. Start to fiddle with the scales, but what you're observing here is kind of the process of trial and error when fitting to new data set. You know, in this case, this is not a new data set, it's a completely new piece of software that is still early in the development. So you get the nice kind of preview of what working with this looks like. But yeah, so here it is. This is the 3-dimensional structure that actually constitutes a density map. Beside being a bit of a low resolution, this is what we had in Polyform and worked with for the past 3 years. And here it is with the deposit. So basically, what the galaxies are emitting. Yeah, it kind of messes things up, so I tend to suppress that a little. Yeah, in Polyform, we had the ability to slice this data, so that's still a feature I need to implement. Cameron.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask, is there a way to look at a thin slice to be able to see some of the actual web more easily than in projection? But yeah.
Yeah, I could answer that. Still,
I mean, this is still super cool, but
yeah, I'm just going to, like, you know, upsell this by saying this is a real-time simulation that's running in Python in a Jupyter notebook on the GPU, 30 FPS. I'm pretty happy with that so far. The only limitation that seems to be an issue with the framework I'm using for the GPU synchronization or communication, i.e. Taichi. Taichi is still a project in development. It's still quite young, experimental. The fact it runs is great, but they have quite some limits on the memory. So for instance, if I try to allocate larger fields, right now, the two fields, the trace and the deposit, they take about half a gig memory. This GPU has like 12 gigabytes of memory, so I could allocate much bigger. But this thing crashes when I allocate more than a gigabyte. They have an option to actually vary that. Crazy. So here I'm actually trying to get 2 gigabytes, and even if I exceed 1 gigabyte at this setting, it crashes. So there still seems to be quite some bugs with Taichi, but it's a project with a very lively, development. So I'm assuming that eventually will fix that. If not, then we'll just use low resolution previews for visualization and high resolution, sort of like sliced up fitting for the actual reconstruction offline.
Right.
So it's gonna work one way or the other. But it would be nice to actually have high resolution in the visualization. Yeah. Any feature requests besides being able to slice this?
I'm still taking it all in. This is really, really cool. So no obvious feature requests at this point. This is pretty sweet.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, as with the previous versions, you can actually vary all these sampling settings. So I can actually change the sampling behavior and yeah, get the greedier version of the algorithm, the one that actually doesn't work so well. Even though here it looks pretty legit, there's definitely some collapse structure in there.
One question on the exported data. This is fantastic to see the culmination of all this effort and a start to having a more platform independent implementation of this is fantastic. So the data that we export here, are these going to be in this sort of binary, the binary table file format along with the metadata extracted in a text file?
Nah, that's in the past. I'll just give you an ND array.
I'm sorry.
I'll just export these as ND arrays, or I mean, in the future, hopefully they'll support feeds and ND 85. But for now, it will be just Python native ND array that you can load in Python directly using NumPy.
Great.
I guess I have a really quick question about when you load in the sample data set that you're going to run the agent network on, is it just a series of it was XYZ and then weights?
Yeah, for now.
Just a scalar field, like a NumPy array of a scalar field or something.
Oh, it's actually the points themselves.
Okay.
So that's the discrete locations of galaxies. That
Yep.
said, you can also load continuous data as basically a starting deposit field. And actually, I don't have that in 3D running just yet, but I have it in 2D. And in the remaining 10 minutes, I actually wanted to show you another use case, which is kind of a classic slime mold and Physarum thing that uses continuous input as the starting point.
Cool. Okay.
So let me show you that actually. So if there are people who are actually knowledgeable about the humble origins of slime mold computing, I prepared a classical road fitting or road reconstruction scenario. So yeah, as I mentioned in the talk, one of the first uses of slime mold was to reconstruct roads or railways or either. And the way how they did it was take major population clusters or population centers and let Slime feed on it. So now we have a virtual version of that. As an input, I found this beautiful population map where major population densities are represented by just bright spots, very easy to see what's going on here. So I kind of post-process this map to look like to look like such. And this is just a grayscale image. And I just take this image and I load it into PolyPhy as a continuous input, which then emits the deposit field directly into the actual grid. And so here it is. Same as before, we can go crazy insofar as the reconstruction parameters go. So I can change the scale of the highways to just kind of, well, first of all, I'm gonna disable the agents. The agent sort of auto generated structure so that we actually just feed the data. And yeah, just get different scales for everything. So you can get major roads, minor roads, whatever your heart desires, as far as the data goes, obviously. So you can't go below that. So let me just try to get a really quick reconstruction here that kind of looks legit. This is a completely new data for me, so I don't have a very good intuition yet. But hopefully we get something reasonable. Let's directions go. Basically, what I'm trying to do is get a good compromise between the detail and still kind of not underfitting or overfitting. Okay, how's this? People of America, does this look like your country?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I
Okay.
wonder, I realize it's a number of independent agents working in a network, but is there a way, this reminds me a lot of traveling salesman. Is there a way to beat NP complete stuff with this sort of, or NP hard stuff with this sort of technique? Like using the slime mold algorithm to somehow make a more efficient method of doing traveling salesman or doing some of these challenging network-based problems?
Well, the common consensus is that yes, that this solves or approximates NP complete problems. The difference, of course, that you're not actually trying to run the optimization of getting from A to B or getting through a sort of a click in a graph. You're trying to generate a network that would then enable you to travel the most efficiently between any pair of points. Sounds like a more difficult problem. I don't really know. I'm not an expert on traveling salesmen or any of these like highly coveted graph algorithms. But yeah, as I said, the common consensus is that the Physarum simulation or this actually approximates optimal transport networks. I actually have prepared a little verification of this. So here's the actual map of the US highways. It's just the major ones. Let me get this screen, which I just exported from We paste it in here and make this semi-transparent. So yeah, what I'm trying to do is just overlay the two images. So kind of pre-rotated the
Very interesting.
template now. Okay, this seems to match, right? Okay. Anyway, so yeah, now we can wait. Huh? Yeah, okay, good enough. So what do we get? So starting in California, since that's where most of us are or have been at some point, we have the LA. I'll just be like varying the transparency of the actual map. So we get the LA cluster down there. We have I-5. I don't know why the original map actually shows I-5 today. Because here all the major population centers lead differently. Oh yeah, actually I-5 doesn't go through the big cities, right? It goes kind of more west of that. So all
The real question is what's pulling it east like that?
well, the I-5 is just built in like kind of in sparsely populated areas. In the data, it's Bakersfield and Fresno, right? In here. We also get 101, which is actually not on the interstate map. But yeah, continuing north, we get I-5 going actually all the way to Portland and further. We get the road 80, I guess, from Sacramento to what is it, Reno, and then Salt Lake. Anyway, so it seems like a pretty decent match to me.
Yeah, also considering that there are geographical features that aren't included in the map or in like that prevent the road from going, it can't cross a mountain range or something like that. And even ignoring that with the agent-based method, it's still doing a reasonably good reproduction.
That's a really good point. I mean, down here we're going through like Arizona and New Mexico, which are not as mountainous where what is it, 40 is going. So we actually get almost an exact match in there. Like almost too good to be true, but there it is. But yeah, this like 15 over here, it's still there. But yeah, I-5 is a good example. Like it actually doesn't go through the cities.
Actually, one reason for Arizona might be that part of that population grew up around that interstate that was there.
Oh, really?
In other words, Arizona has grown much more quickly than other places over the past
I see. Okay.
50 years, I bet.
That's interesting. But yeah, I mean, Cameron, there's an excellent point. We are completely ignoring mountains and deserts and mines and all that. Wherever you have population centers, you definitely get an estimate there. But some of them might just not match the real roads because there is more complex planning there. I've been focusing on the west side of the states, mostly because the east side is just nuts. I mean, there's just no accounting for what's going on here. But look at Florida, right? It's working relatively well. Not sure about Texas, maybe not so well.
So,
yeah, there's.
What I don't. So, when you talk about the different roads here, you can think about the fact that some of these roads were built roughly before some of the major cities existed, but you're kind of going in the reverse direction here. You're looking at where the major cities are now and trying to extrapolate that to where the roads should be.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that follows the same behavior.
Well, as far as I know, from a guy who actually was trying to do these simulations, it's kind of a back and forth. So I don't know if you guys heard online, but the question is like, is it correct, or is it a valid approach to go from the population centers to roads where it might be the other way? So as far as I know, it's both ways. It's a feedback loop. So people move where roads are, and roads then are built where people are or need to be. So yeah, definitely this is an incomplete approach, and I guess you're just trying to show that it makes sense to.
Could you zoom in on Florida? I mean, I know a lot about Florida highways. So if you zoom in there, you have Alligator Alley, which is I-75. That goes right through the Everglades. So I'm curious how it gets Florida for that.
Where is 75?
Bottom right.
Okay.
Florida in the bottom right.
Florida. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's the Alligator Alley there. So, I mean, the East Coast makes sense. Just curious, 75 looks almost straight, but actually, you don't get I-75 east-west at all, do you? No, you don't.
Yeah, this is.
Not really.
Yeah, there's. I mean, the road kind of swings up, where slime mold tends to go straight.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, the reason they built the road like that is just the Everglades restricts where you could actually build. So that information is like the mountains and stuff is not built in the simulation.
Okay. Yeah, I really have no idea. I've never been to Florida. So there's mountains in Florida? Anyway,
No mountains, just swamps.
Are there mountains in Florida?
No, well, there is one fake mountain in Florida. It's 230 feet, and that's at Disney World. But
okay. All right. There's a hump.
well, the Everglades is the big reason for the the southwest portion of Florida.
Okay.
You really do not get any roads in that area, but I'm a little, yeah.
All right. Well, I hope this was a fun exercise. We actually need to wrap up. So back to slides. Just to finish up. So yeah, I just wanted to recap what actually we're planning to do with PolyPhy next, the overall objectives, and where this is going. So just to rephrase, PolyPhy is an open source multi-platform package. Whether it's already multi-platform, we have to thoroughly test. I've seen some issues on M1 on Apple, but that seems to be related to Taichi. So I'll be submitting some issue reports. But yeah, we want this to be accessible to as many people as possible, obviously. Guys on the call and whoever's interested in the web. It's a GPU accelerated with CPU fallback, piece of software. We'll work on some and ways of beating. Give me a second, I'll close the door. Yeah, the other session is over, so we're chatting. You guys are chatting about the roads. I'm probably lucky. So yeah, so it's a GPU accelerated software, or primarily like all the important bits run on GPU. But CPU is always an option, and it's an option you can set in Taichi itself. You probably will not get an interactive visualization, but might run a few FPS. What we also want to do is support filament cataloging in the style of Disperse. We are working on this with a student who was part of Google Summer of Code, and we're actually trying to kind of pave a pipeline based on ParaView and a library called TKK that's actually integrated in ParaView. This is actually also in collaboration with Farham, who's been helping me mentor this student, Hari. So that's going pretty well, I think. As I mentioned, we want to support both supervised and unsupervised workflows. So basically, in the end, we want to figure out how this can operate on its own without the user intervention. And I think we're getting there because all these 3 years of experiments have taught us about what kind of factors play important role in actually fitting to this data. So far we have 2D and 3D. So I'll be definitely prioritizing these 2 dimensionalities, but in the future we also want to extend these to n-dimensional fields. So far this is prevented by just trivial dimensionality because the fields have to be represented by dense arrays, and of course that will not scale above 3D. In fact, that's already limited right now. Hey, you're wrapping up here. So I had some slides on the n-dimensional case, but in the interest of time, let me just say we are looking for contributors. Obviously, as a new project, we need all hands on board that we can get. Both technical and non-technical roles, even artistic. I had to skip over the artworks we have done so far, but definitely there is place for a lot of different roles in this project. So get in touch if you're interested or have feedback or comments. How to get in touch? You can shoot me an email on olec@ucs.edu. There is a lot of information about the research on my homepage. We have Twitter, this is my personal, and this is for the whole project. And then here are some QR codes for links. This is kind of an overview page of the whole project effort. This is papers, and this is the repository itself. And I just wanted to leave you with artworks. The poem written by a fellow in UK who responded to our very first paper in this beautiful way. And this is a sort of expressive version of the algorithm that we use for interactive installations. So that's it from me. Thank you for being here, your feedback. And yeah, any other questions remaining?
This is great work. Thanks, Oscar.
My pleasure. Thanks, Cameron.
Yeah, that's what this is. Hey, Oscar, good job. Sorry, we were talking over your last minute. Let's mute this real quick. You're done, right? I'm not just walking.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.
I'm sorry, I didn't